So how do you define yourself as an artist?
I'm an opera composer, mostly composer of voice, opera, theater. I'm a pianist by trade, but lately you'll find my works done on stages across the United States.
Oh, that's amazing. And what type of things do you have going on with your composing? What are some things you focus on as theater, opera, etc.?
Yeah, usually a lot of stories I try and tell are both timely and timeless, and so you're dealing with things, whether they're current events or some entity that happened, whether it's a biopic opera. My first one was Angel of the Amazon, about Sister Dorothy Stang, who was a nun in Ohio, who worked with the poor in Brazil. And that goes to things where I have a new musical comedy called Yeltsin in Texas, which is about when Boris Yeltsin visited a Texas grocery store and renounced communism in the parking lot in 1989. So it goes all over. But these stories that kind of look at us and what we're doing today, but also told in a lens of something that happened in the past.
So do you do a lot of focus within opera and theater?
Yes, so I've been very blessed in writing a lot collaborative process, which I love in terms of working with singers and directors and lighting designers, costume designers. And so I was very lucky because I fell into it. I always composed. Being a pianist, there are a lot of lonely hours in a practice room. Mm-hmm. And I think secretly I crave to work with a lot of people. And so I would write for my friends, and so often in college it was chamber stuff, and then I worked with a choir, and so I had a lot of choral stuff. And then I stumbled upon the story of Sister Dorothy Stang while I was finishing up my doctoral studies at the Conservatory in Cincinnati, and wrote my first opera. And operas usually take 5, 6, 7, 8 years to write, and I remember I wrote my first one. I was very lucky. I ran in New York, and they said, "So what's next?" And I said, "What's next? I just spent 6 years of my entire life. What are you talking?" And then I was like, "Oh, hey, there's something here." So I started with a writing partner, Joshua McGuire, as my librettist, and we've written 7 operas that have been done all over the place.
Any favorites of yours so far?
There's a few. So one near and dear to my heart is Roscoe, which is an adaptation of William Kennedy's novel, and William Kennedy is the Charles Dickens of the Capital Region here. And that had a premiere at the Siegel Music Colony in 2016, and then a huge concert performance with the Albany Symphony and Deborah Voigt at the Palace Theater. So that's a real favorite one because it was just this massive entity that lifted off. And then on the more intimate side, we wrote a children's opera called Lucinda. It's a Christmas opera based on the folktale, the Poinsettia, and that's been seen by 25,000 kids across the United States in schools, churches, colleges, opera houses, and it's mostly in underserved areas, kids who've never seen an opera. And what I love about that is that they could care less who wrote the show. It's just they're taking in the story, taking in the theater, and being swept up by it. And you see, these kids interacting with their performers, and there's no boundaries either. We have things in the show where there's a heel kind of and they'll fight right back, or they'll cheer for the good guy and boo the bad guy. I love that stuff, and so that's a real special piece of mine that keeps getting done each year.
Yeah, that's one thing I love with working with kids, is that their imagination is so vast that they really won't see the people behind the scenes. They will truly just see the purity of your work.
They're in the moment and they're honest, which is great. So, I always tell people when they're mounting, make sure this is the most rehearsed piece you've ever done, because if you lose focus, the kids will lose focus and they'll tell you about it. So you have to, they keep you honest, and yet the reward is tenfold.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of youth and music, tell us a little bit about your program, We Are Instrumental.
Yeah, We Are Instrumental. It started in 2020. I moved to the Adirondack region with my wife and 2 kids, and my son came home, and he was 10 at the time, and he said, "Dad, some of the instruments the kids are playing on are mangled and bandaged with duct tape." And I said, "Oh, get out of here, you're telling tales, And then I learned quickly that many students in the area cannot afford to rent or own instruments, and it's not just to where we live in Ticonderoga, but the entire Adirondack region. And therefore, the schools have to own all of the instruments to provide a musical education that's required by the state. And you can imagine the years of wear and tear on instruments. So We started with an instrument drive at Skidmore College, where I'm a professor, in 2020, and collected 70 instruments, most of them ready to go. I mean, anywhere from drum sets to trumpets, saxophones, all got to Ticonderoga schools, and that transformed their entire inventory. And then we looked outside our community and realized that it's an issue in the entire Adirondacks. And so that is how We Are Instrumental was born. As first a concerned parent, and then became our own 501c3 this past year in 2022.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
With the students who are involved in this, because this is a big deal, to be able to have access to something that is a passion of yours, and to be able to have that access be of high quality as well. What are some of the impacts you've seen with the students?
You watch their whole way of thinking get transformed. It gives them a greater sense of belonging. They're happy to take this thing out of the case. And most importantly, there's never a hurdle. So can you imagine if you're in 5th grade and you go and start and your instrument breaks, and now that instrument has to be sent away for 6 weeks to get repaired because there's really not a repair shop for 2 hours. All you've done is lost that enthusiasm for the first month they've learned. So in addition to giving them a new instrument that would work and to avoid that problem, the other thing we've addressed is trying to make things more sustainable. So we create with Bill Cole's Woodwind Shop, and Bill Cole comes up to Ticonderoga 3 times a year. We have instrument repair clinics for band directors to get New York State continuing education credit. And it keeps problems small. So it makes things sustainable in the sense that, if a flute loses a pad, it doesn't become a 6-week send out, it becomes a 1-day fix. And so that kid can keep practicing and keep making music. And so that potential is just limitless once you break down that barrier.
That's so amazing. Just
Yeah.
being able to give youth the opportunity to succeed within their passions, especially as artists, is priceless.
Right.
I would have loved seeing something like that myself as like a young high schooler or elementary student, or heck, any age, to be honest.
Yeah.
So where do you run this program exactly?
So we're based out of Ticonderoga, New York, and we service all 6 counties now in the Adirondacks. So it's and in one capacity or another. So some schools will get instruments, others take advantage. Teachers will take advantage of the repair class. We have enrichment opportunities as well, because that's another barrier to access, where students haven't been on an arts field trip since 2008. And so we remedied that a little bit this year and brought 7 different schools to come see Ensemble Connect at Skidmore College for a special performance. Rolled out the red carpet for them, fed them a boxed lunch, and had just a great time where they could, see kids in other schools do that. So we're just growing more and more as the need is there. I find that it's any little bit of access goes a long way. So can you imagine if you're so excited to play the flute, but your school doesn't have a flute ready for you? So now you have to pick your second choice or your third choice. So even from that moment, that might create a different pathway or relationship to music. And we're trying to break that down and just say, nope, that kid's gonna have a flute. They wanna play that instrument as their first choice. That's what they're going to learn on, right? And if they don't like it after a month, they can have a second or third choice, because everything should be working and easy for them.
There we go.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great philosophy
Yeah.
to have.
Yeah.
So I know the communities have to have an amazing reaction to this. Any highlights from the community's reaction that have stuck in your heart?
Yeah, there's 2 that come to mind. One is, actually the other day I was downtown, and a woman pulled me aside and said, "Are you the instrument guy?" I said, "I think so, yes." And she said, "My daughter went on that trip you organized to New York City. My opera was running off Broadway, and we Are Instrumental chartered a bus for 50 students. Probably a third to a half of them had never been to New York City. I could guarantee no one on that bus had seen an opera, and so they saw my show, and their grandmother said, my teenage daughter, or teenager, which they don't talk, had not stopped talking about the show for the last week, the whole trip. So that felt a lot. And then to me, my biggest highlight, we got a thank you letter from a 4th grader in Willsboro, New York. And he said, "Thank you for the alto sax. I'm now the coolest person in the world."
Everyone loves a saxophone player. They're
Everyone
cool.
wants to be the coolest person in the world. You know?
That's true.
So yeah, those things, they really, I cherish those. You know?
That's such a wonderful program.
Yeah.
If folks were watching this and like, well, I want to donate some instruments that I have, how do they do that?
Right. So if you go to weareinstrumentalny.org, you have the ability to contact us about that old instrument that's hanging out in your closet. If you want to give small donations to help us with repairs or sponsor a student for enrichment activity, all of those are possible. And you can really get some details and interactive pictures. We're also can be followed on Facebook and Instagram. We do some fun things with kids on videos, playing things, so opening the unveiling of the instruments, all of those things to kind of see how that impact happens. Because what's nice about the work is it's these one-on-one relationships that we're building with students and teachers in these school districts, and you see the impact right away. I mean, you see what they've been playing on, and then poof, they have something brand new, shiny, working, ready to go, and you can see the joy in their eye, and those are things you can follow on the website and social media.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and keep spreading the joy, Evan. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful.